I've been involved in the community for a long time, but I've gotten more involved since September 11th on a variety of recovery issues and now on rebuilding issues. And it was always clear to me that we had to fight for everybody. One, because it was right, but two, because there's power and strength. I mean, the real mantra now of downtown rebuilding efforts are that there are 50,000 of us. We're the silent majority. But that's 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus another 49,998. That seemed to be a new concept.
I mean, 50,000 to 3.
It's just absurd that people who live a few miles apart could have such a different experience. By the same token, if you had ever told us that we would ever live in a place where 3,000 people had been murdered next door, we would have said that you were crazy. But here we are. I think people, certainly all over the city, are not necessarily living their life on a more day-to-day basis, but they're not buying theater subscriptions. They're not making long-term plans. And I think that's just the cultural response to uncertainty. It's Bethany Balloon's birthday. It's November 1st,
2001. So 2 months after, about 8 weeks afterwards. And our view, you know, you can't really see the view through the machine over there, but, you know, we're looking right over the site here. There's still the building is still about 14 floors high on 1 Liberty. You know, just the wreckage. And the cranes are working.
The picture of the facade of One World Trade was taken from our corner.
You know, everybody knows that they couldn't just take the garbage away. They had to go through it first to find remains. And I think that's ultimately what probably changed my consciousness the most, was having for so many days and weeks and months in a row, having outside my window, seeing the off-duty firefighters raking through every last thing.
And you knew when they found someone because they...
Right, and then you'd see
an ambulance.
You'd see the ambulance, and you'd know when they found someone.
You would know.
And everybody would stop working, and then you know, you just see it again and again and again and again and again. And you go through stages. You won't look out the window. You stare out the window. You won't look out the window. You can't help looking out the window. And so
you cover your window.
Right, so you cover your window. Right, precisely. So we have all these people over to our house for really the first party we've had. And we were not even living here, right? We weren't living here.
We weren't living here. Everybody got really drunk. And we had this whole place. Not what you would expect from a bunch of kindergarten parents getting together for the first time with the teacher.
And you know, people want, you know, and I remember even then people are wanting to go to the roof. And I have to say, this was potluck. It was a potluck, and I think, and Matt, maybe that's it. Maybe that's a little turning point there, which is that somehow we had a potluck dinner here that worked. And you know, in order for a potluck dinner to work, there has to be a real kind of 60s sense of communitarianism. And yeah, I mean, remember, Lizzie and I are children of the 70s and 80s. You know, we start living by ourselves in Manhattan in the 80s. Not a particularly communal period of our nation's history. And, well, that was an interesting part here. Although we didn't move back. We didn't move back to the house for another 2 months afterwards.
Another 3 months.
After September 11th down here, where you would literally hear parents and your friends vowing, I'm going to keep this together, you know, we're going to, you know, I'm going to make this happen, and just, you know, insisting on opening their house and keeping it going and keeping the kids on track and everything. And that was interesting too. And you just have, you know, and nobody of course knows what's going on. Nobody knows what's happening, what's coming next. You add into the mix something else here, which is September 11th. Right. And that's something which had a tremendous effect on me in terms of the community and my feelings and my place in it. And just a couple of anecdotes, for instance. After September 11th, trying to get mail, right? Trying to pick up your mail, and having that be pretty impossible when your building is closed, and then finding out, for instance, that if you went to the Peck Slip station and you brought your identification that they were holding mail there, and going there and seeing Mike, the mail delivery guy, and embracing Mike and weeping because this was the guy who brought your mail.
And Mike's a jerk. We should add that. Mike's a total jerk.
Or the garage guy, you know, seeing the garage guy, seeing Willis, and just once again just falling into each other's arms, and you know, washing the cars. It was a very interesting fulcrum that you go through when you go through such a terrible thing, and you add into this what had previously occurred, such as the marriage and the purchase and the children, and then you get these very intense experiences. So, for instance, you have the first birthday party after September 11th, right, for the children. Not my children, but the first birthday party of the group of children, and having all the parents back together again, and seeing all those children that hadn't seen each other for a month or so, and seeing this party happen, and all of us are walking around dazed, but also just kind of just crying and talking to each other and so happy.
I think it's a very important value, and one that's missing from our culture generally. And I think people are reluctant to acknowledge the positive impact of September 11th on their life, certainly on their school, on their families. People are so surprised that after all that the kids went through, the kids at 234 went through, they scored number one, in the citywide test. Well, hello, they had 600 kids, 1,200 parents. All they did for 4 months was hang out. Well, what'd you think was going to happen? It's the parents, stupid. And that seemed to be such a new concept. People seemed so kind of delighted to lose temporarily their kind of worldly conceits and focus on each other.
The entire community is suffering their own way from post-traumatic stress syndrome. It becomes their way of life. And that's part of what makes us a community also, is that nobody else really understands that very basic, that kind of basal psychological level in which we're dealing. So, for instance, the first time I went to California, my folks are in California. You go out to California, went out to LA, and it's like I felt like I was on another planet. And we
totally felt like junkies, like we had this horrible shared thing that nobody else got. That was.
And finally, you go back and like, oh my God, here's a PS234 parent. They understand. They understand what we've been through.
So what I realized was that in order to build in a homework desk, we needed to reverse the sliding doors. It sounds like a kind of arcane thing. It's a huge issue. Could it be accomplished technically? And I did a lot of research, and I found the company that could tell me. So I called them up. Could they come switch the door? Well, it's a $100 consultation fee that you can apply to services or purchases. Well, I couldn't schedule the appointment. I just couldn't schedule the appointment. And after 6 or 7 weeks, I realized that the reason that this is in the spring of 2002, I realized that the reason I couldn't schedule the appointment was that I just didn't feel confident enough that we would be here in the fall to make the $100 worthwhile. Not that we would leave, but that something would happen. So not that we would leave voluntarily.
Right.
And when I realized this, I just thought, well, that's ridiculous. How can I live that way? I can't live that way. I mean, that's like dying a little death every day. I cannot live that way. And I called American Door, and they came. The jury's still out. They'll get back to me. So it was $100 to learn that I could live with the uncertainty of not knowing how long we'll live. And I don't know, maybe this is kind of a romantic notion. I mean, I think that that is a fear that parents experience on behalf of their children. I mean, I know that I still look at my children and I see death. And that is truly horrible, to have to live with that and keep on living. To have to encourage your children to think about their future while not knowing, or not necessarily believing 100% that they have a future. That's hard. So I think that's a new thing.